Welcome to Justice Watch's weekly news roundup of corruption, coming to you from your fascist state. Our first story this week is about 6 police officers who were cleared this week after they killed a man 7 years ago. They attempted to restrain him, and in doing so, they contributed to his death. An inquest this year found that the police used excessive force, pain compliance techniques, and multiple mechanical restraints, which likely led to his death. Some very interesting words and phrases being used there. I call it strangulation and murder. Pain compliance techniques. Is that just a nice phrase to say torture? Multiple mechanical restraints. What's that? It's murder. In the case of Kingsley Burrell, officers were cleared this week after they were found not guilty of lying under oath, even though they did lie under oath in court. They killed a man just like in the previous story about 6 years ago. This is how long it takes for these court cases to go to the proceedings. It is not in our benefit, the public. It's always in the benefit of the assaultee, the killers, the police. In the case of Rashan Charles, he was also suffocated and killed by police this year. The family have come out and said that they are being victimized by the police. A relative member of the family, who is also a former police officer, has accused the police of being disdain.
Excessive and unnecessary force, which resulted in his death on July 22nd, 2017. It is clear from the widely circulated CCTV footage and the additional damning footage that the officer failed in his duty and must be held accountable. As horrific as the CCTV is, I'm glad that it's out there, because without it, I'm sure the family would have been given a totally different story as to what happened that night. However, you look at the CCTV footage and it throws up a lot more questions. Why was Rashan stopped that night? Now, if Rashan were alive, he would have been entitled to be told why he was stopped. However, he didn't walk away from that encounter with the officer, and he died that night. And we're here as his representatives, and we've asked, why was Rashan stopped? What powers was the officer working under when he stopped Rashan? Now, we're not asking whether or not it was lawful at this point. We're not asking what his rationale was. We're just asking, why was he stopped? What powers was the officer acting under? And we're not being given that simple answer. So it feels, if Rashan were alive, he would have been entitled to know. But he's dead and we're not being told. So it feels that his rights have died alongside him. You look at that video and you don't see someone who resisted. So the next question, why was excessive force used on someone who did not resist? Why was a civilian allowed to place handcuffs on Rashan? And is that person really a civilian? Why were the handcuffs left on him when he was no longer breathing and no longer moving? Why was meaningful first aid not administered sooner? Why 2 months after the event has this officer not yet been interviewed? Rashan was a victim of gross ill-treatment and gross negligence. And he didn't receive meaningful first aid when it became needed after he encountered that officer. And as a result, he died at the scene. His friends, family, and you, the well-meaning public, we've all had to watch him die on screen. And you watch his last breath, you watched his last movements on screen. And there's lots of questions, there's lots of answers that are needed to these questions. And a lot of these answers aren't forthcoming, and we will not be content with any stalling tactics on the part of the IPCC. We expect them to work diligently, and we expect a fair and transparent investigation. But what we've seen recently is the officer's identity being protected. Now, the issue with that is we met on the 19th of September with the IPCC, and we were told that the Met had until mid-October to make representations as to anonymity. Anonymity means, if you don't know, that when we have hearings and the officer has to state his case, he can do so from the security of a screen. He doesn't have to look at us. We don't know what he looks like. We don't know what his name is, and he doesn't have to look at the family or a jury to state his case. Now, we were told that they had until the 19th of October, until mid-October, to make their representations. We came out of that meeting, and 2 days later we found out that they'd already made those representations a week and a half before. We weren't notified. The family were never given the opportunity to make those representations. Now, if you're making such representations, everyone who is a concerned party should be able to make those representations, and we weren't given the opportunity to do so. And then a day later, an interim order for anonymity was granted by the coroner. Now, we weren't, as I said before, given the opportunity to make our representations as to whether we agreed with it or not. Why should the officer be allowed to give evidence from behind a screen? If you have nothing to hide and you acted lawfully, justice must be seen to be done. Sit before the family and say, this is why I acted this way. The results were unfortunate. However, these were my lawful actions. The family being left out of such processes is unacceptable. The family is being treated with disdain by being left out of these processes, and we will not stand for it. Rashan leaves behind a grieving mother, father, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends. He leaves behind a daughter who is too young to understand why her dad isn't around anymore. No mother should ever have to bury her child, especially under circumstances like this. This cannot continue to happen. Our young men cannot continue to die on our streets, and we sit there and look for reasons why we can blame the victim and maybe something happened before. The video is clear. You can see exactly what happened, and for the first time ever we have footage that shows you someone well walking in and dead carried out. We are a large family. We speak with one voice.
When police officers are not killing members of the public and covering up those killings, they are raping them. A report came out this week that police officers basically rape members of the public every 3 days. Why is this profession so... Why do so many rapists and pedophiles and killers work in this profession? Why can't they just recruit good people? That's what I said last week. The pedophilia within the police force has gone to a level now where we have members of the public that are forming groups and hunting down these pedophiles because the police will not investigate these pedophile rings. And when these pedophile hunting groups capture these pedophiles, the police refuse to arrest those pedophiles. And judges condemn these groups that are tracking down these pedophiles and keeping them away from our children. What is happening to this country, to this police force?
But we need to get the evidence first.
I've got all the evidence here. I've just said to you, I've got the evidence here.
It's the police station where it's like where we can sit down. We've got officers waiting to take your statements off you.
Right, and I'm telling you, officer, that I've got evidence here, enough evidence, like we do every other time. There's over 50 of these we've done now, right, that gets his arrested at the scene. I've just explained to you, there's live children involved in this as well.
You've told me it's a decoy.
No, this is a decoy, the evidence I've got. We have evidence of live children.
Right now is this.
And we'll go and give us a full statement after.
We're not going to lose any evidence by you two coming to the police station now.
Because there's no one at risk at the moment.
There's no one directly.
Right, sorry, is there children in that house, officer?
You just said there's no children.
No, I haven't said there's no children. I said the 12-year-old child that we've got the decoy.
We can certainly check that, can't
So, well, as I say, that's fine. That,
we need you to come to the police station.
And I said I'm happy to come to the police station. I want this man arrested, and we will come and do the evidence exactly how we do every time.
Why do you need to be present?
Why do we need? Because would you know anything about this Mal?
Just come to the police station.
Would you know anything about this Mal? May I talk now? Would you know anything about this Mal and his activity?
You've done enough talking. I'm asking. I want you to answer.
Right, well, if I've done enough talk, I can't do listening either.
Why did you not come to the police station?
Yeah, as we see, guys, this is what. Sorry.
Answer that
Sorry,
question.
officer, we stand back. Don't keep getting my personal space. Yeah, I'm just walking away because I've got no interest.
Can't speak and you can't do nothing. Answer my question.
Look, I'll answer your question.
Okay, why did you not come to the police station and give us the evidence?
Because these people shouldn't be protected or hidden, officer.
No, they wouldn't be, would they?
Well, yeah, they would.
They would have acted on that information.
But if they would have acted on it, you just said the police would have acted on it. If they would have acted on it,
Answer my question. Why have you come here rather than going to the police?
to confront this person and hand him and the evidence to yourself.
Why didn't you come to the police station to do that? Why do you need to confront him?
Because we want to confront him with evidence and ask him why he's done that.
Why do you need to do that?
Because that's what we do. We protect children.
Why do you have to confront him though?
If we come to the station, this would be brushed under the carpet.
No, it wouldn't be brushed under
Right.
any carpet.
Officer, after we expose these people, you put them into protective custody, right? You don't protect the children, you protect these people. We expose these people, right? Because I can tell you now, officer, right? So you're walking away from me.
Also this week, the inquest of Edward Heath, the ex-Prime Minister of this country, who was accused of raping and killing children. The police came out with a verdict. The inquest verdict was, police say there were grounds to suspect Edward Heath over child abuse claims. They suspect. He was a pedophile, a horrific, satanic pedophile, involved at the very top. This is why we have pedophilia in the police force. Because they know they can get away with it. Because the whole system is run by these pedophiles. All the way up to the royal family. Jimmy Savile, Edward Heath. You tell me that MI5 does not know about what they get up to? MI5 don't have files on Jimmy Savile? They don't have files on Edward Heath? Of course they do. Because they use those files for blackmail. That's how they control the politicians. Through blackmail. It's horrible. It's just fucking horrible.
With Heath, it's a similar situation, you see. See, when you have a paedophile who is exposed, who is running a children's home, okay, it's some sick, weird person running a children's home. Okay, okay. Yeah, I see the story. But we're talking about a prime minister. We're talking about the man who, more than any other politician, was responsible for us being in what is now the European Union. And therefore, when you're talking about that level, the potential for kicking off further into the web at a high level is enormous. So the last thing they want is for people to take this seriously, because if you think about it, if a sitting prime minister is a pedophile, and he was more than that, he was a Satanist, as I said in The Biggest Secret, then what else is going on? What else is possible?